Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Friday the 17th of February. I'm Andrew Wilson and this is Scotland at 7. Today I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 359 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition. Then I will introduce our guest for this evening, and then together we will discuss today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking at in his opening address to the Munich Security Conference, said it was obvious that Ukraine would not be the last stop of Vladimir Putin's invasion. The conference is expected to be attended by more than 100 world leaders and diplomats, including the US Vice President Kamala Harris, and the event will be seen as a key test of the West's resolve to fight out a grinding, prolonged, expensive war. French President Emmanuel Macron urged allies to intensify their military support for Ukraine to help the country carry out a much-needed counter-offensive against Russia, speaking at the Munich Security Conference. Allies who can deliver battle tanks to Ukraine should do so now, Olaf Scholz of Germany said at the same event. Negotiations will start in a week on extending a UN-backed initiative that has enabled Ukraine to export grain from ports blockaded by Russia after its invasion, a senior Ukrainian official said earlier today. Ukraine's state broadcaster, Suspilny, reports that the energy grid is working without consumption restrictions today across all of Ukraine, with the exception of the city of Odessa. Finland's parliament will vote on the 28th of February to approve the necessary legislation that will allow the country to eventually become a member of NATO. Facebook allowed the exiled Moldovan oligarch Ilan Shor, who has ties to the Kremlin, to run ads calling for protests and uprisings against the pro-Western government, even though he and his political party are on US sanctions lists. Russia has fired Grad rockets and barrel artillery at a residential district in the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, killing 2 men and 2 women and wounding 9 more, Ukraine's prosecutor general said. Russia has definitely changed tactics by using decoy missiles without explosive warheads and deploying balloons to fool Ukraine's air defences, according to a senior Ukrainian official. And the UN General Assembly will vote next week on a draft resolution stressing the need to reach, as soon as possible, a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Now, we are lucky enough to be joined this evening by McLaughlin, who's the SNP Member of Parliament for Glasgow North East. That's the constituency she lives in and which she describes as wealthy beyond its wildest dreams in terms of the many brilliant people and diverse communities living there. In 2015, Anne won the seat from the incumbent Labour MP Willie Bain on a swing of 39%, breaking the record for the biggest swing in a general election. She then, however, narrowly lost the seat to the Labour candidate Paul Sweeney at the snap election in 2017, and then regained the seat from Sweeney at the general election in 2019 with a majority of 2,500 votes. Anne has lived in the constituency for more than a decade, and although hailing from sunny Greenock originally, has been in Glasgow since 1985, when she was accepted at the then Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama to study acting. Anne, good evening. How are you keeping?
I'm doing really well, Andrew. I'd forgotten most of those things, so thanks for the reminder of my long life.
My
I'm doing really well.
absolute
How are
pleasure,
you?
Anne. I'm doing well, Anne. It's a pleasure to see you on Broadcasting Scotland today. Thank you for giving us your time. We're very grateful.
You're welcome.
Our first story this evening is that the SNP NEC has agreed to the timetable for members of the Scottish National Party to choose a new leader. Nominations for leader opened at 23:59 on the 15th of February and will close at midday on the 24th of February. The ballot will open at noon on the 13th of March and will close at noon on the 27th of March. The National Secretary will make the results of the contest public as soon as the result has been determined and after the candidates have been advised. The National Secretary, who's Lorna Finn, said, "I am pleased to confirm that the NEC has tonight agreed a timetable for party members to select a new leader of our party and country. Nicola has been the outstanding politician of this generation. We are very fortunate that she will remain an SNP MSP and a leading campaigner for an independent Scotland. But the SNP is full of talented individuals, and they now have the opportunity to put themselves forward, and our new leader will lead us into the final phase of Scotland's journey towards independence. Should there be a contest with two or more applicants, then the selection of the new leader will be held on a democratic one-member, one-vote basis. Democracy is in crisis in the UK right now, but the SNP and Scotland's future must and will be decided at the ballot box. Lorna Finn also said that it would be wrong to have a newly elected leader tied to a key decision on the route to deliver democracy in Scotland in the face of continued Westminster intransigence. Therefore, the party's Special Democracy Conference, previously planned for Sunday, March the 19th, has been postponed until after the new leader has been elected and installed as First Minister. So, Anne, firstly, what have you been hearing from your constituents since the news of the First Minister's resignation broke earlier this week?
We had a brilliant, I'm in Provan SNP. As an MP, I cover part of Provan and part of Maryhill Springburn. And we had a brilliant meeting on Monday night. That was before the news broke. And I was surprised because it was a short notice meeting and it wasn't somewhere that's easy to get to by public transport. And on my way there, I thought there'll be nobody here. And the place was heaving, and people were really, really enthusiastic about some of the stuff that was coming up. What I've heard from members initially were mostly devastated to hear that Nicola was standing down, and particularly a lot of younger females were really upset. And I don't know, I kind of, I see things slightly differently. I want Nicola to have a life to call her own. So I can see it from that perspective as well. But it took me aback quite how tearful a lot of people were, quite how emotional people were. So yeah, there's been, that's the response to Nicola going, and now, well, there's lots of chat about who could replace her, and whether or not the special conference should have been postponed or whatever. But everything I'm hearing so far is pretty positive. It's got people talking.
Well, it certainly has done. It certainly has done that. I've never seen so many broadcasters travelling so quickly from London to Edinburgh as we saw this week. It's just remarkable. We were talking about you were talking there a little bit about the future. Do you think will the combination of a new leader for the SNP at Westminster, Stephen Flynn, who's already appointed, and a new party leader, do you think that will make a significant difference to the SNP?
Um, I think whoever we choose will make a significant difference. Will build on, the work that Nicola Sturgeon and others have done. I think it is going to be difficult to fill Nicola's shoes, but you couldn't possibly expect somebody to start out being as good or as exceptional as Nicola is, and she had to grow into that role as well. I mean, there is something quite exceptional about Nicola's leadership skills, but there's lots of people that I think could do an incredible job. And the thing is, it's not about, and I think Nicola said this herself, it's not about personalities, it's not about individuals. And I used to laugh when people would say, "Oh, she's making it all about her." Well, that's not what she wanted. That's what people did. People made it all about her. But really, we've got a really strong, vibrant movement right across Scotland and beyond. We've got lots of supporters and members in other parts of the world. And whoever we have is going to take this forward. But the membership will take it forward. The members and the supporters will take it forward, regardless of who's in power. But yeah, I'm looking forward to. I'm quite excited about what's going to happen next for the SNP and for the independence movement.
Thanks, Anne. That's grand. And I think the one other thing, just as we've got you here this afternoon, do you think and reflecting a little bit on the successive leadership competitions and contests we saw from the Conservative Party last summer and last year, do you think should broadcasters be encouraged to host a leadership hustings for the SNP leadership contest, if there is a contest?
Yeah, I think the wider you can spread your net, the better. The more you can do. I think the party probably will have, branches will invite the leadership candidates, whoever they may be, supposing there's more than one. I think there will be. But branches will invite people. I think the party will probably do something that will be able to be accessed by all members. But I think we've got a really good, strong message. So, you know, broadcasters doing something that everyone, non-members and members alike, can access, it can only be to the good.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. Well, I'm sure that we will be coming back and following this story very closely as it unfolds over the next few weeks. But we'll move on to our next item now, because Rishi Sunak has arrived in Belfast last night in a sign that a deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol might be imminent. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, also travelled to Brussels today for talks with the European Commission Vice President, Maroš Šefčovič. These movements suggest that an announcement of a negotiated solution between the UK and the EU could even be reached today. Mr Sunak is being accompanied by the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris. EU diplomats have reportedly been summoned to a briefing today, with speculation that a draft deal is about to be shared and road-tested both in Belfast and Brussels. A UK government spokesperson confirmed Cleverly's meeting in Brussels, but played down the prospect of any deal being unveiled today. A deal would conclude 4 months of negotiations to end a row that has caused fissures in the Tory party for the past 3 years and has led to the suspension of power sharing in Belfast. An agreement has been on the cards for the last 4 weeks and is expected to include a settlement on the elimination of some checks on goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, and a new dispute resolution mechanism not involving the European Court of Justice in the first instance. Checks and governance were sources of tension in the Conservative Party and with the DUP. The government is expected to say its new deal complies with the strict 7 tests the DUP set in exchange for its support. Earlier this week, Nigel Dodds, a former deputy leader of the DUP, indicated that the DUP would not be supporting any deal that continued regulatory divergence between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, claiming this would continue the colonisation of Northern Ireland by the EU. Sunak is meeting all political parties today, but the focus will be on the DUP, which has insisted it will not return to power sharing unless its 7 conditions for reform of the protocol are met. Few expect the DUP to support the deal unless it eliminates the application of EU law in Northern Ireland, which is one of the 7 demands of negotiators. So, Anne, firstly, looking at the wider politics here for a minute, does the attitude and the approach and the positioning of the DUP perhaps give us an insight into how the right wing of the Tory party will operate over the next few months and years? It could be argued that the DUP and the ERG are in so many ways indistinguishable from one another.
Yeah, it could be argued. I mean, to be honest, I just don't know. I just can't help but thinking that, do the DUP actually want something to work? I mean, it's their country, not the DUP's country. It's not really for me to tell them what to do, but I can't imagine that the people of Northern Ireland are in any way happy at what's happened and at the suspension of Stormont. And can you imagine it happening here? And none of this was necessary. None of this was necessary. And it's all because of this, I was going to say, failed Brexit project. Well, they didn't fail in exiting Brussels, but the results of it have been quite catastrophic, not least for Northern Ireland. So all of this was unnecessary. All these years later, they still haven't resolved it. We don't know. I welcome it if they have resolved it to the satisfaction of the DUP, because I feel that the people of Northern Ireland deserve better than this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anne. Also, it struck me, why do you think the Prime Minister is apparently no, a Prime Minister who some might argue is relatively weak? Why would he be prepared to spend political capital on this? Do you think, is it about positioning the UK with the, or repositioning the UK with the EU, and perhaps more importantly, positioning the UK with the USA?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a more likely scenario. I think, you know, they were probably quite shocked when they discovered that I think the bit of the Brexit campaigning that they did believe, the Tories, did believe was that the world was just waiting to do trade deals with Britain. And I think they were quite surprised to discover how low down they were in the priority list for most countries. So I think yes, they're looking at what can we do to strengthen relationships with the EU? What can we do to sort of mitigate some of this? They're never going to admit that, of course, and of course the US. But who knows? I mean, I wouldn't like to say that I could get into the mind of Rishi Sunak. We've yet to really figure him out completely, I would say.
That's a very good way of looking at it, I think, and thank you. Let's move on to our next item now, though, because ahead of the Scottish Labour Party conference, which is taking place in Glasgow this weekend, the Scottish Labour leader has said that Nicola Sturgeon's resignation as First Minister of Scotland represents an opportunity for Labour in Scotland to regain some of the voters they have lost since support for the party collapsed in Scotland in 2011. Mr. Sarwar said that he is focused on winning people's trust on their merits rather than hoping that disaster falls upon their opponents. While calling on pro independence voters to vote for Labour to deliver constitutional change, Mr. Sarwar insisted that anyone who supported yes to Scottish independence could not become a Labour Party candidate. The Scottish Labour leader insisted that Sir Keir Starmer would not do any deals with the SNP in Westminster, which of course is in contrast to the party's enthusiastic willingness to do deals with the Conservatives in local councils across Scotland. So, Anne, firstly, we've this week we've seen and heard lots of London-based political commentators. Beth Rigby, I'm looking at you, talking up the prospects for the British Labour Party in Scotland after the announcement by Miss Sturgeon. But given that Labour has only one MP out of 59 and 22 MSPs out of 159, and by what Anna Sarwar says is more determinedly unionist than ever, uh, is there any realistic prospect of the Labour Party doing anything other than continuing to bump along the very bottom of the polls?
I mean, I don't want to not take seriously any threat from any political party. I think, I'm sitting in a seat that we lost in 2017 and regained in 2019. So I don't want to not take it seriously, but I'm not really following the logic. The 2011 was the real downfall for the Labour Party in Scotland. And, to say that Nicola Sturgeon stepping down is going to reverse all of that, well, Nicola Sturgeon wasn't the First Minister or the SNP leader in 2011. So the problem's a bit more widespread than people liked Nicola. And also, yes, I mean, I think people really can see how hypocritical in particular the Scottish Labour Party is. I mean, I hadn't actually heard some of what you've just said, but for an Ask Sarwar to say, well, you can't possibly stand as a candidate for the Labour Party, even if you're a member of the Labour Party, if you support Scotland's independence. Okay, so there's that. And Keir Starmer, no matter what, even if Keir Starmer needs SNP MPs to get into power, i.e., to get rid of the Tories that are wrecking all of your lives, even if Keir Starmer needs SNP, he won't do a deal with them. And then at the same time, he's saying, but independent supporters vote Labour, and we'll what? We'll what? This has been going on all of my lifetime. There's always all these fake promises that come to nothing. And it's just a question of whether the people of Scotland are sufficiently um, cynical of the Labour Party, or if they're prepared. But I'm not seeing much of a sign of it, to be honest.
Thanks, Anne. And I was reflecting this week, even before the political bombshells that have landed this week. I was reflecting that there must be at least one generation of voters in Scotland, young voters in particular, who have no experience of a Labour government at all, either at Holyrood or at Westminster. Uh, Now, do you think in those circumstances that the Labour Party will be able to come forward with an offer that is attractive to those voters who have never had the opportunity, have never voted for Labour before?
I mean, it's difficult to tell. I suppose if you've never experienced Labour telling you one thing and doing another, then I guess, they're if they had really good PR in place, they could. But the problem for them with that is that young voters are far more likely to support independence, far more likely to support independence over staying in the union. So I guess you could try to convince those young voters, but then they're going to be saying to themselves, "But why are you telling us that we're better to stay? We're better to stay in Britain." But again, those young voters, the ones, as you say, who've not lived with a Labour government, also haven't a huge amount of experience of voting Labour only to discover we've still got a Conservative government. So perhaps they could convince them. But I do think the pull of independence, which, the Labour Party would be a sticking plaster and not a very good one at that, because I watch them all the time down there and there's some really good Labour MPs, don't get me wrong, but they don't support what their party's doing. Their party, the Labour Party, is trying to out Tory the Tories. So if you know that, then you know that it's a very weak sticking plaster. Whereas the other option for young people in Scotland is not a sticking plaster, it's independence. And independence is an opportunity for us to start again and to start on our own grounds, if you like. So I just can't see the circumstances in which young people in particular, could be persuaded to give up on the idea of independence for a very weak, not very sticky sticking plaster.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anne. As you say, you've got particular experience representing Northeast Glasgow, so I'm confident we'll come back to you for more analysis as this story plays out. But we'll move on now because the chief executive of NatWest, what was RBS, Alison Rose, received a £5.2 million pay packet in 2022, becoming the bank's second highest paid boss ever, and that's after the controversial ex-banker Fred Goodwin, and that's after the bank reported its largest profit since before the 2008 financial crisis. The bank, which had to be bailed out after the crash and is still 44% owned by the taxpayer, reported today that Miss Rose's pay had soared by 46% from £3.6 million a year earlier, partly because of the higher value of shares given to her as part of a long-term incentive plan. NatWest increased the total bonus pool for its bankers to £367 million from £298 million a year earlier, after making bumper profits of £5.1 billion in 2022. That's up a third on the year and the highest since 2007, when profits hit £10 billion. The rise in profits last year was partly as a result of a rise in loan and mortgage costs, exacerbating the wider cost of living crisis for borrowers. Alison Rose also received the first dedicated annual bonus paid to one of the bank's chief executives since Stephen Hester led the bank, when it was still known as RBS, back in 2010. Ms Rose's annual bonus was worth £643,000, comprising 50% cash and 50% shares, marking the first time the bank has paid a cash bonus to its CEO since 2007. NatWest confirmed that her pay is the second highest, only to the £7.7 million package paid in 2006 to Mr Goodwin, nicknamed Fred the Shred, for his ruthless cost-cutting, whose excesses were criticised for crippling RBS and leading to its £45 billion government bailout during the banking crisis in 2008. The rise in profits follows an increase in net interest income. That's the difference between what the bank charges for loans and what it pays in interest on deposits, which went up 30%, at £9.8 billion. So, Anne, I mentioned there this pay award to Alison Rose is the second highest, and it's being compared to that paid to Fred Goodwin in 2010 when he received £7.7 million. Now, the back in 2010, RBS NatWest was a considerably bigger bank than it is now. The process of rescuing the bank has involved shedding much of the bank's operations and drastically reducing its workforce in the UK. So on the one hand, the comparison with Mr. Goodwin's pay, in a sense, it shields the fact that a much smaller bank is now generating is clearly much more profitable now than it was even at the bank's heyday in the period before the financial crisis. So what really struck me was that the profitability of the bank has clearly increased dramatically, and there's a similar increase in the pay award being given to the chief executive, and that's something which most of the rest of us are definitely not seeing at the moment. So, do you think that a pay award of this scale is going to bring a degree of criticism to the bank and to its chief executive?
Just a tad. I mean, honestly, well, I was about to say I have no words, but you're interviewing me, so I better come up with some and words that you don't have to bleep out. But I'm so sick of this. I'm so sick of this. Where is the decorum amongst these people? They get paid well enough without accepting, massive increases, 46% increase. And where's the comment from the Tory government that says it can't pay public sector workers any more than what they've offered them because of inflationary pressures? It would push inflation up. Well, why are they not speaking out about this? And where's the sensitivity, as I said, in the decorum here? I'm so tired of hearing this. I mean, I'm a member of SNP Socialists, so I think it's pretty clear what I think of this. Fine, reward people for the work that they do. I'm not suggesting we pay her living wage or minimum wage or anything. I live in the real world, but this is obscene. It's absolutely obscene. And we've seen in recent days that the Centrica boss is refusing to say, well, he was certainly refusing yesterday to say whether he was going to accept his £1.6 million bonus. And bear in mind, Centrica is the parent company of British Gas that was forcing its way into the homes of extremely and obviously vulnerable people to force fit prepayment meters. And he presided over that. And he's sitting there saying, not sure if I'm going to take my 1.6 million. What planet are these people on? I mean, I said I had no words, right? You're going to have to stop me because I've got too many words. I just feel that, for people out there, for me as an MP on a really great salary, I am outraged. But for somebody out there that's struggling, and let's face it, there's a lot more people struggling right now than normal. I just think it can be extremely dispiriting for them. And, it makes people think that they can't fight the system. It makes people think, well, no matter what I do, no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I try to look after my kids, I am never getting out of the bit. And I'm never going to, because this is what the world revolves around, is people like that getting paid massive amounts of money, huge increases. And I think that can be extremely depressing for people, and it kind of dampens their ability to fight back. And that really worries me. And you really are going to have to interrupt me, because I'm just going to go on about this for the rest of the time if you don't.
Well, I'm sorry, Anne. We'll not torment you with this story any further, and we'll move on.
Thank you.
But that's some great perspective you're giving to us there. Thank you. We'll move on, as I say, because the release of sensitive details about the missing woman, Nicola Bulley, was as sexist as it comes, the former Victims Commissioner has said, as Lancashire police come under further pressure over their handling of the case. Dame Vera Baird condemned the force's dreadful decision to divulge medical information about Miss Bully, saying that it was the biggest error that I have seen for quite a long time. The Lancashire Constabulary has faced growing scrutiny since it revealed that Nicola Bully had had significant issues with alcohol brought on by the menopause before she disappeared 3 weeks ago. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has expressed her concerns to the force about the release of the personal information. Braverman demanded an explanation from senior officers and is said not to have been wholly satisfied with their justification. The Information Commissioner said he would be asking the police about their decision to make the disclosure. John Edwards said data protection law exists to ensure people's personal information is used properly and fairly. This includes ensuring personal details are not disclosed inappropriately. We recognise that at this stage of an intensive live investigation, the force must focus all their energies on the inquiry, but given the high profile nature of this case, we will be asking Lancashire Police to set out how they reached the decision to disclose this information in due course. This row has overshadowed the marking of 3 weeks since Nicola Bully disappeared from the Lancashire village of St Michael's on Wyre on the 27th of January after dropping her 2 children at school. Lancashire Constabulary has already referred itself to the police watchdog over the contact that officers had with Miss Bully on the 10th of January as part of a welfare check. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is assessing the information following that referral. So, and firstly, Emma Cunningham, who's a senior lecturer in criminology at the University of East London and is a policing expert, has said that Lancashire Constabulary's approach could lead to victim blaming and could undermine public support for Nicola Bully and her family. She said, where you do get issues around women and victim blaming, you also get the problems around justice in those cases. So it's at the very least troubling. So, and do you think is Emma Cunningham correct in her analysis of the latest phase in this investigation?
Oh yes, I mean, I don't understand. See, do you see if them revealing this information was going to take us any closer to finding out what happened to this woman, then maybe I could understand it. But there is I'm not seeing any link. I mean, I think what they maybe are trying to imply is that she's taken her own life because she had these issues that we should never have known about. But if she has done that, nobody knows what's happened to her. If she has done that, this information will not help us to find her. If she has gone away of her own volition, because she's really struggling, this information being known to the entire world is not going to make her feel able to come home. And I saw the family put out a statement saying, please, if you're out there, Nicola, don't be frightened. But she will be terrified because there is such a stigma around people with addiction, and there's still a lot of embarrassment around menopause. That's dissipating, but a lot of people feel very private about that. But the biggest issue is the problems with alcohol. Anyone can have a problem with alcohol. Anyone can have an addiction to anything, and there's no fault there. But that's not the way a lot of the public view it. The people are blamed, and people are stigmatized, and whether she has gone away and is now really going to struggle even more to come back because you've told everybody about her struggles, or whether she has passed away and now a lot of people will look at her as a very different person, and they'll have gone from seeing her as this, picture perfect mum of little kids, with a great career, to seeing her as a drunk, effectively. And that is not fair. We have a lot to do to reduce the stigma around addiction, all sorts of addiction. But currently, that's where we are. Lots of people, their whole attitude will have changed towards her now. And I'm just stunned that it wasn't even as if they let it slip out. They held a press conference to talk about it. Well, again, you're going to have to interrupt me or I'm just going to keep going on about this. Just
No, it's
It's a lot.
that's quite all right, and and certainly what I should say, and I'm sure you would agree with me that our thoughts remain with Nicola Bulley and her family whilst the police investigation is ongoing. But let's move on to our next story this afternoon because protesters in Iran have marched through the streets of multiple cities in the most widespread demonstrations in weeks. Online videos purported to show earlier today. The overnight demonstrations marked 40 days since Iran executed two men on charges related to protests that began last year and went on to grip the Islamic Republic for a month. The initial unrest, which began after the 22-year-old Masa Amini died on the 16th of September, 3 days after her arrest by the morality police, morphed into one of the most serious challenges to Iran's theocracy since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The group Human Rights Activists reported that demonstrations took place in Tehran as well as in the cities of Arak, Isfahan, Izeh in Khuzestan province, and Karaj. In Iran's western Kurdish regions, online videos shared by the Hengo Organization for Human Rights showed burning roadblocks in Sanandaj, which has seen repeated demonstrations since Masa Amini's death. Hengo shared one video that included a digitally altered voice shouting, "Death to the dictator," a call that has been repeatedly heard in the demonstrations, targeting Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Since the demonstrations in Iran began last year, at least 529 people have been killed, according to human rights activists. More than 19,700 others have been detained by authorities amid a violent crackdown trying to suppress the dissent. Iran has not issued any overall casualty figures, though the government seemed to acknowledge making tens of thousands of arrests earlier this month. The demonstrations had appeared to slow in recent weeks, in part due to the executions and crackdown, though protest cries could still be heard in cities at night. So, and firstly, it seems that the protests in Iran are beginning to heat up again once more. Does that suggest to you that the extremely violent repression by the authorities there is not working? I mentioned at least 529 people have been killed, and of course, four have been executed.
Yeah, and I think it was nearly 20,000 people in jail over it. What does that say about the people protesting now? It says that they are amongst the most courageous people in the world, and I really do pay tribute to them because they clearly know when they're out protesting they could end up in jail. Goodness knows what might happen to them there, or that they could end up dead. And they must make a conscious decision when they're going out to protest that says, I know that I may die, but I have to do this for the future of my children and my country. And the fact that they're doing it is just incredible. I can't imagine what they must have gone through to push them to this point. But, it's not going to change unless these courageous people keep being courageous. And I really do wish them all the best. And I hope that it's over sooner rather than later, and over in such a way that the people, are in charge once again.
Thanks, Anne. And we'll stay in the Middle East for our next item because Taliban fighters have stopped the sale of contraceptives in two of Afghanistan's main cities, claiming their use by women is a Western conspiracy to control the Muslim population. The Guardian is reporting that the Taliban has been going door to door, threatening midwives and ordering pharmacies to clear their shelves of all birth control medicines and devices. One veteran midwife who did not want to be named said that she had been threatened several times. She said that she was told by a Taliban commander, "You are not allowed to go outside," and to promote the Western concept of controlling population, and this is unnecessary work. Other pharmacists in Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif confirmed that they had been ordered not to stock any birth control medicines. Items such as birth control pills and the Depo-Provera injections are not allowed to be kept in the pharmacy since the start of this month, and we are too afraid to sell the existing stock, another shop owner in Kabul said. This is the latest attack on women's rights by the Taliban, who since coming to power in August 2021 have ended higher education for girls, closed universities to young women, forced women out of their jobs, and restricted their ability to leave their homes. Restricting contraceptives will be a significant blow in a country with an already fragile healthcare system. At the moment, 1 in every 14 Afghan women dies of causes related to pregnancy, and it is one of the most dangerous countries in the world in which to give birth. So, Anne, firstly, before we look at the detail of this story, I know that you've been working in connection with the Afghan resettlement programs, bringing Afghans to the UK and to Scotland. So, are you able to give us an update on the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, the update is that we've got nowhere, astonishingly. So we were in touch with, as an office, my constituency office, we were in touch with 101 people in Afghanistan who should have were entitled to access one of the schemes. Some of them were in danger because there were women working in well, women basically. There you go. I'll just stop there. There were women, but working in jobs like we had female lawyers. We had people who'd had direct threats from the Taliban, whose family homes had been turned over looking for them, whose other family members had been shot dead by the Taliban. People who'd worked as interpreters, and multiple different people who absolutely needed to get out and were entitled to access some of these schemes, and the British government has done nothing. And when so I lie. One person has come over. We managed to get one person over, so we're now in contact on and off with 100 people. But it's very hard for my team because they're trying to keep their spirits up and just send them wee messages now and again. But what have we got to tell them? We've got nothing to tell them. Yes, you should be allowed to come here, but sorry, you're in danger, but there's nothing we can do. And so just very briefly to say that when you hear the Tory government talking about incessantly about people coming over on small boats and trying to characterise them as people that are just trying to take the mickey, I better say take the mickey, out of the system here, who don't actually need our help. A lot of them are from Afghanistan. And the reason, regardless of where they come from, the reason they do these treacherous journeys where they're risking their lives is because there are very few, almost no safe and legal routes for people to access. This is the only way that they can come. The Tory government know that. They don't care. They just want to ruin their reputations. They want to have you believe that they're all coming over here to take our jobs and to take our money and to take advantage of us. Nothing could be further from the truth. Those people that we all agree in Afghanistan who should be allowed to come over, some of them are finally making their way to those boats. Some of them lose their lives en route. Some of them get here and are treated like criminals. Well, you
Absolutely,
wanted me
Anne.
to say
Thank you.
something
That's
about sorry, just to say something. Can I say something about the Taliban? Have I got time?
please. Yes, of course,
Yeah,
please.
I mean, what the Taliban are doing and forcing women to stop using contraception, saying that the West is trying to control them. No, you're trying to control them, but it's part of a global thing that really worrying me in terms of women's rights. As a feminist, and I mean, in the 1980s, when I started being a feminist was a bad word. It was like you wanted everything to be. I mean, feminism is just about equality. That's all it's about. I think most people accept that now. But as a feminist, I'm really concerned. If you look at the United States and the states where they are outlawing abortion, regardless of who wants to access it, regardless of why they want to access it. So they are taking away the control from women over their own bodies. The Taliban are doing that in multiple different ways in Afghanistan. And even what we just talked about, the thing about Nicola Bulley, the fact that they thought that was acceptable to talk about the personal issues that she was facing, even that to me is misogyny. And when it's happening officially, as it's happening in the States and in Afghanistan, and that was a police force officially, using that woman's menopause and addiction issues, I'm worried. I'm worried that, and we've got to. You can never take your eye off the ball when it comes to equality of any sort, and gender equality is one of those things, and it's just really dispiriting. And we can't rest, and we can't rest on our laurels. We need to step up the support for people that are experiencing what they're experiencing at the hands of these misogynists.
Thanks, Anne. And just with that point in mind as well, I and many were alarmed at the cartoon, which is still published in the pages of the Independent yesterday, which showed a cartoon of Nicola Sturgeon having been decapitated. And so, do you think, whilst Twitter, of all organisations, took that down for breaching their guidelines, the Independent is still, as I understand it, is still publishing that cartoon at the moment online. So do you think, is this another example of widespread misogyny, or perhaps a misogyny that is increasing, especially in respect in countries where, such as Afghanistan, and potentially in countries like Scotland as well, where again the media here is controlled from outside our country?
Yeah, I mean, the cartoon itself, I was stunned, but I should wasn't particularly surprised. I was stunned that they did it. I'm stunned. I would call on them to remove it. If you've got any decency. But and Nicola wouldn't necessarily want me to say this, but she has been ritually abused in a misogynistic fashion for years now. She's incredibly strong and very single minded in that her job was to control. Not to control, better not say that. Her job was to run the country and lead the independence movement. She really was very focused on that, so she couldn't allow herself to be sidetracked by the misogyny. But there's no chance that that did not impact on her, and it certainly impacted on her family and friends, who shed many a tear over the way that she was treated. So yeah, it is a really poor sign that there was also a newspaper, I can't remember which one it was, yesterday, had a photograph, two stories side by side, one about Nicola Sturgeon and one about Nicola Bulley, and a big picture of Nicola Bulley, the woman who's gone missing, feared drowned, and a headline about Nicola Sturgeon saying that her dream of independence is dead in the water. And I thought, does nobody read? Does nobody look at what they're? And that may have been inadvertent because I think they did take it down, but utterly shocking. There's a lot of people need to really think about what they're saying and what they're doing and the impact of some of the stuff that they're saying.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. Now, let's move on to our next item now, because environmental organisations, community groups, landowners, and farmers will be eligible to apply for a share of £1.8 million of funding to help grow their nature projects. The Scottish Government and Nature Scot, working in partnership with the National Lottery Heritage Fund and with support from the Green Finance Institute, are launching a new programme to help scale up private investment in Scotland's natural capital. Grants of up to £240,000 will be offered to organisations and partnerships to help develop a viable business case and financial model to attract investment in projects that can restore and improve the natural environment, such as, for examples, woodland creation, marine enhancement, and peatland restoration. Successful projects will also demonstrate the means to engage and share benefits with communities, contributing to a just transition. The Facility for Investment Ready Nature in Scotland programme also aims to ensure that investment in and use of Scotland's natural capital creates benefits that are shared. So Anne, Nature Scots Director of Green Economy Robbie Kernahan said that Scotland's nature is in crisis. Its unique habitats and ecosystems will only continue providing the benefits to our well-being if we act now to value it and to invest in it. And so if what he says is correct, if this is a crisis, is this latest initiative soon enough, and is it big enough to address the crisis?
I wouldn't claim to know enough about it to be able to really answer that, but it sounds to me like it is being taken seriously, and there's a big push on it. And I certainly support any calls to do that, and I certainly support what the Scottish Government, and I think you said the Heritage Lottery Fund are doing, because you never know what you've got until it's gone, and we really do need to do all we can to protect all of the beautiful natural resources that Scotland has got. And sometimes it can be a difficult call because you're trying to patch people up. In the health service, you're trying to make sure people have got an education. We're struggling because of the Liz Truss effect on the economy, and Scotland's budget being worth less. So sometimes it can be a really tough call to know exactly where to put your money. But so I'm glad that they are doing it. And yeah, I'm going to go away and read about it after this, because it sounds really interesting. It
I'll,
sounds like the kind of thing that if we didn't do it, we'd look back in years to come and think, why did we not deal with that at the time?
Well, that's a very good point, and you mentioned the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and thinking not about the specific policy, but thinking more about the approach here, is the Scottish Government collaborating with Nature Scot and working in partnership with the Lottery Heritage Fund and the support of the Green Finance Initiative. Is that collaborative model between a number of agencies? Do you think is that a good way forward for addressing a number of issues, not least of which is the need to invest in Scotland's green economy?
Well, it does sound to be, doesn't it? It's many partners coming at it from different perspectives. So, as I say, I don't know enough about it to comment properly, but it does sound to me as if that is the right collaborative approach. And also, I think you said something about, people could get funding to develop business models that would mean that it was sustainable and sustainable for other businesses and other organisations. And I think that's the way that this Scottish Government has always done it. If you look at community empowerment, it's the way that they've always done it, and it's worked. So yeah, it sounds to me like, yeah, this is the way forward. But as I say, I'm no expert.
That's quite all right, Anne. Thank you for your thoughts. And we've got our final item now this evening, because one of Scotland's most famous castles is due to reopen its doors after being closed for essential conversion work. Dumbarton Castle, I'm not sorry, conservation work. Dumbarton Castle, which once sheltered Mary, Queen of Scots, before she fled to France, will reopen on Saturday tomorrow, Historic Environment Scotland has announced. Access restrictions were put in place at the start of last year as a safety precaution, while HES, which manages the site, introduced new measures to deal with the risk associated with potentially unstable high-level masonry. Once the castle reopens this weekend, visitors will be able to climb the White Tower Crag for stunning views over the Firth of Clyde, explore the artillery fortifications to see fine examples of 18th century architecture, and enter the guardhouse and explore the magazine. One minor access restriction will remain in place at the Spur Battery, which will exclude access to the Spanish and Bower batteries. Ground level restrictions also remain in areas around the base of the rock, which is managed as part of HES's routine rock risk management. Dumbarton Castle is the latest site to reopen following the completion of high-level masonry inspection. Since inspections began in May last year, HES has been able to increase access at more than 30 sites, including Doon Castle, Burley Castle, Dundonald Castle and St Andrews Castle, which have reopened after their surveys have been carried out. Dumbarton Castle's history spans hundreds of years. As well as being an important royal castle in the Middle Ages, Dumbarton was also a mighty garrison fortress, with defences being packed with guns, and saw military action as recently as the Second World War. In 1548, Mary Queen of Scots was brought to Dumbarton Castle for safety before she sailed to France. So, Anne, as I say, in February 1548, almost exactly 474 years ago, the 5-year-old Mary was brought to Dumbarton and stayed there until the French king's own galley, escorted by 3 other ships and under the command of Admiral Villegagnon, arrived in July to take her to France for safety. So, do you think, bringing the story into the news today, do you think the royal history of Scotland does it still resonate with people?
I think it does for some people. I'm just thinking what a lucky girl she was because she had 5 months, was it, of being able to gaze out to sunny Greenock, where I come from and all my family live. And what beautiful views she must have had. I mean, I pass Dumbarton Castle twice a week. I go down to my mum's once a week in Gourock. I've never been in. I'm really excited to hear that it's reopening, and yeah, I think people. I mean, I don't think our history, our royal history, um, impacts on us in any way other than people are generally interested in history and the kind of fun and folklore of it all. So yeah, I think they'll get a good. I think they'll get a good turnout, and as I say, they'll get great views of Greenock. So what more could one person want?
Absolutely. I'm not sure how well the very wee Mary was. There's certainly it's said that she caught measles when she was in Dumbarton, and there were rumours at the time that she had passed away. But she clearly was kept safe and clearly enjoyed her time, albeit that she then departed for France. But that's all that we have time for this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs, and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to develop the station, and to make new programmes. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of raising £30,000 to enable us to continue to pay the bills. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras or in any other way, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Click on the wee bell. We will be back at 12 noon on Sunday for the next edition of the Full Scottish, so please come back and join us then. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has been watching today, and I would like to say a very special thanks to our very special guest, Anne McLaughlin MP. Thanks, Anne.
Welcome.
I hope that everyone has a very peaceful weekend. Bye bye.